1 Peter chapter 2, verse 2 through 10 reads, "Like newborn infants, long for the pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow into salvation, if indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good. Come to him, a living stone, though rejected by mortals, yet chosen and precious in God's sight. Like living stones, let yourself be built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For it stands in Scripture, 'See, I am laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. To you then who believe, he is precious. But for those who do not believe, that stone that the builders rejected has become the very head of the corner, and a stone that makes them stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. They stumble because they disobey the word, as they were destined to do. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." There's a Spanish proverb that goes, "An ounce of mother is worth a ton of priests." I think there's probably a lot of truth in that. Moms are just awesome. I think they must be designed that way. They give us their presence. They're just always there when we need them. They teach us the difference between right and wrong, and they love us. They support us. They kiss the boo-boos when we fall down, and they show us what self-sacrificial love looks like. But I think it's important, talking about mothers today, that we recognize that not everyone's experience with motherhood is the same. For some, motherhood is not planned, and it's not always a welcome surprise. For some, biological motherhood just isn't possible. And for others, moms, well, they weren't all that kind to them. And for even others, motherhood, under the best of circumstances, is still less than a bed of roses. But the truth is that many of us out there have moms that are not always biological mothers. There are people in our lives like grandparents, aunts, family members, friends of the family, just anyone who fills this role and exhibits these qualities could really be considered our mothers. So today, Mother's Day, to all the moms out there, biological or not, today's your day. You are awesome, and happy Mother's Day. Now, the scripture from 1 Peter chapter 2 reminds me of moms for a number of reasons, but primarily because it focuses on our identity and our responsibility. It tells us that we were a group of scattered individuals, but that we are called from this darkness and formed into a nation. In verse 9, it identifies us as a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people. And it tells us that this identity gives us the ability and the responsibility to proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Now, as a kid, when I would act up, get in a little bit of trouble, I know it's hard to believe, but it did happen every now and then, my mom would ask me this question. It was a soul-piercing question. Just who do you think you are? And I used to hate it when she would ask that question, because on the surface, it seems like, the answer's pretty obvious. But after several smart aleck responses formulated in my young teenage mind, I found out very quickly that she wasn't referring to anything on the surface, not my name, my country of origin, or even my social status. She wasn't asking me who I wanted to be when I grew up, or who my friends thought I was, or who they wanted me to be. She was asking me a legitimate question. Who do you think you are? My mom, and to be fair, quite a few others, were instrumental in helping me to answer that question. Because of her and others like her, I can tell you that I know that I am a loved person, even when I don't deserve it. I know I can love others because I was taught that by example. And I know I have the ability and the responsibility to care for my family, my friends, the community around me. And in the same way, the person of Jesus Christ tells us who we are, but on a much bigger scale. Now, we know we're individuals who mess up. We're not perfect creatures. And even the Apostle Paul in Romans 3 laments this as he quotes Psalms 14 when he says, "There is no one righteous, not even one." We like to do things our own way, and even when that proves to be a pretty terrible idea, we have a tendency to stick with it. But if we keep going, if we keep digging into Scripture, we don't have to go very far to find out that we are also loved people. We don't have to go any farther than John 3:16 to hear the words that God loved us so much, the whole world, that He would give His Son. God, the creator of all things, the one who is above all things, the one who has no need or no requirement to maintain a relationship with His rebellious creation, He chooses out of love to be self-sacrificial for us. Now, unfortunately, we still sometimes forget just who we are. Life gets in the way, things get busy, unexpected things get thrown at us. Sometimes we get a notion that our perspectives and our problems are somehow greater than anyone else's, and we lose sight of the needs of the community as a whole. Other times we go the other way, and we feel insignificant or incapable, or we feel lost or completely unloved. But either way, Scripture reminds us to keep this question before us every day. Who do you think you are? And it really is a critical question, because the answer to this question is what forms the foundation that we build our lives on. If we build our lives on a foundation of self-reliance, because that's who we are, self-sufficient people, then we run the risk of building a very lonely house. If we believe we are inconsequential nobodies, then who even cares if there's a foundation at all? There's nothing to hold up any aspects of our life. But if we know that we are chosen by God, His holy nation, built on a foundation of Christ, well, that changes everything. Because then we find out that, well, in reality, we're not the ones doing the building at all. We find out that we are being built into this spiritual house. And we find out that this foundation isn't meant for just our individual rooms, but for all of God's people. Then we can begin to live into our identity as God's people and accept the ability and responsibility to proclaim Christ's mighty acts, announcing to the whole world God's call from darkness into His marvelous light. And all this because we embraced and remembered who we are. Individuals called together, being built into a spiritual house, built on the foundation of Christ, to proclaim the message to the world that God's love is for all. So here's to all the moms out there, biological or not, the ones who keep us on our toes, who love, teach us and inspire us, the ones who love us enough to never let us forget just who we really are. You are truly a gift from God. I pray that God blesses you and keeps you, and happy Mother's Day. Amen.